4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another literary reading from the Alaska Quarterly Review and the Anchorage Museum at Rasmussen Center. We've extended our 40th anniversary benefit series because it's so inspiring to hear AQR contributors read their work and maybe even chat a bit. You can find recordings of our previous programs at our website. It's aqreview.org and our YouTube channel. Today we have three great writers, Emily Mitchell, Matthew Lansburgh, and Elizabeth Stix. Welcome. I'm Heather Lindy, the Alaska State Writer Laureate, and on behalf of the Center for Narrative and Lyric Arts, thank you for being here today. Gunischish, as we say where I am, here on the banks of the snowy Chilkat River in Haines or Deschutes, Alaska, the land of the Tlingit, Chilkat Kwan, and Chilkoot Kwan since time immemorial. While this reading is free, AQR, like all literary journals, could use your help. So if you're watching this program, please consider a donation. And now I'd like to introduce Ronald Spatz. Ron is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Alaska Quarterly Review, a professor of English at the University of Alaska. Ron is a former National Endowment for the Arts Fellow and the recipient of 2 Alaska Governor's Awards and a Contribution to Literacy Award from the Alaska Center for the Book. And under Ron's, 42 years now, right? Decades of leadership and vision, Alaska Quarterly Review has created strong connections between our state and the larger literary community. And it's also been influential in supporting new and emerging writers, as well as presenting works that include a rigorous questioning of larger societal issues. Ron lives in Anchorage with 2 cats. Ron?
Thank you, Heather, and welcome everyone. This event is being recorded and will be available on the Alaska Quarterly Review YouTube channel, so tell your friends about the programming. Before we begin, I have a couple of important announcements. Alaska Quarterly Review gratefully acknowledges the Anchorage Museum for hosting and providing technical support for this event, and Web 907 for its web support. And the Center for the Narrative and Lyric Arts, Alaska Quarterly Review's 501c3 umbrella organization, which makes this event possible. I also want to thank our friends at the 49 Writers Organization for providing information about this series. Finally, I want to make a land acknowledgement. Alaska Quarterly Review recognizes the indigenous land on which all Alaskans live. AQR is located in Anchorage, and Anchorage is Dena'ina homeland. Dena'ina is the language spoken by the traditional, present, and future caretakers of this land, and land acknowledgement opens the space with gratefulness and respect for the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspective of indigenous peoples and marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. And now to begin, Heather Lindy will introduce today's featured fiction writers, Emily Mitchell, Matthew Lansburgh, and Elizabeth Stix. Heather is, as she said, Alaska State Writer Laureate for 2021 to 2023. She is the author of 4 books of nonfiction, all published by Algonquin Books. If you lived here, I'd know your name. Take good care of the garden and the dogs. Find the good, and of bears and ballots. Back to you, Heather. Let's get started.
Thank you, Ron. I'm very excited. It's going to be a great hour here. Emily Mitchell was born in London and moved to the United States as a teenager, and she's lived in Vermont, Osaka, London, New York, San Francisco, West Virginia, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. She holds a BA from Middlebury College in Vermont, which is also my alma mater. She worked as an editor at Index on Censorship magazine in London and at About.com in New York before getting her MFA at Brooklyn College. She is the author of the much acclaimed novel, The Last Summer of the World, published by Norton in 2007. Publishers Weekly's starred review called it dazzling. It's an imaginative, gripping account of art photographer Edward Steichen's work as an aerial reconnaissance photographer during World War I and was a finalist for the 2008 New York Public Library Young Lions Prize, and a Best Book of the Year in the Madison Capital Times, the Austin American Statesman, and the Providence Journal. She's also the author of a collection of short stories, Viral, also published by Norton in 2015. In addition to her AQR, her work has appeared in Harper's, Ploughshares, the New England Review, The Sun, the New York Times, and UK's New Statesman, among other magazines. She's received fellowships from the Sewanee Writers Conference, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Virginia Center for Creative Arts, and the Ucross Foundation. And she serves as a fiction editor for New England Review and teaches in the MFA program at the University of Maryland. Emily says she loves bad films, ugly animals, abandoned buildings, and the way some pop songs from the 1980s managed to combine sweetness and despair into one. Matthew Lansburgh collection of linked short stories, Outside is the Ocean, won the Iowa Short Fiction Award and was a finalist for the 30th annual Lambda Literary Award and the Ferro-Grumley Award for LGBTQ Fiction. Judges praised his keen ear, mesmerizing storytelling, and compassion. In addition to AQR, his fiction has appeared in journals such as One Story, New England Review, Glimmer Train, Ecotone, Epoch, Electric Literature, Story Quarterly, Columbia Journal, the Florida Review, Guernica, the Michigan Quarterly Review, and has been shortlisted in the Best American Short Stories and also in the Pushcart Prize series. Matthew holds degrees from Princeton, Stanford, and NYU, where he received an MFA in fiction as well as a Veterans Writing Fellowship. He lives in New York with his partner and has received fellowships also from the Sewanee Writers Conference, the Bread Loaf School, MacDowell, and Yaddo. As a graduate student, he taught expository writing at Princeton and creative writing at NYU, and he currently teaches fiction workshops and craft classes for Catapult. Since 2019, he has served as a reader for the scholarship and fellowship applications in prose for the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. Matthew Lansburgh, who says he's interested in how people can form incredibly close bonds and then grow apart. In some instances, reconnect years later. And one of the best things about growing older is that, quote, I am now able to see the trajectory of my life and my relationships in a way that I couldn't when I was younger. I've come to realize that most friendships are complicated and multifaceted. Bay Area native Elizabeth Stix stories and short pieces that read like commentaries or notes to friends or former friends have appeared in McSweeney's, Tin House, the Los Angeles Times Sunday Magazine, and more, the anthology Best Microfiction in 2019, and of course, Alaska Quarterly Review. She won the Catherine Mnuchin Scholarship Prize, and her short story, Alice, won the Bay Guardian Fiction Prize and was optioned by Sneaky Little Sister Films. The Racket Literary Journal notes that their editors have been big fans of Elizabeth Stix's darkly funny, often sometimes surreal short fiction for a long time. Her work spans from sentient, mother-shaped pimples to overly familiar bears to dirigible spouses and much more. And all of it, they say, is fantastic. Elizabeth also founded the lit mag, The Big Ugly Review, and SF Weekly named her one of the best Bay Area writers without a published book. That's about to change, I bet, as she's currently completing her linked collection, Things I Want Back From You, which is also the title of one of her very funny pieces. Elizabeth is also a book editor at abc-books.com. Emily, we'll begin with you. Thank you for being here today.
Gosh, well, thank you, Heather, for that incredible introduction. And thanks also to Ronald Spatz and the staff of AQR for inviting me to be part of this extraordinary series. It's great to have a chance to read with Matthew and Elizabeth, both of whose work I so admire. I'm going to read just the first part of my story that was in the winter and spring issue of Alaska Quarterly Review this year. I've been interested for a while in non-human narrators and characters. And I've also been interested in what seems to me to be the mandatory positivity involved in some kinds of contemporary speech. So this story combines those elements. And I think the only other thing that it might be useful to know is that the person being addressed in this story has just woken up in hospital and isn't totally sure what's going on. And then out of nowhere, they hear a voice. The story is called The Assistant. Hello, good morning, welcome. Don't try to get up. You're still dazed from the anesthetic and perhaps a bit disoriented too. It's best if you just lie back and relax until those sensations subside. You've been through surgery, and though I can assure you it went very smoothly, it might still take a while to recover. Fortunately, there's no rush. You can have whatever time you need to rest and get your bearings before you try to sit up, stand, or walk, unless, of course, that period exceeds the clinic's maximum allowance of 72 hours, at which point you'll have to vacate this bed or face additional fees and penalties of an amount to be determined then. But let's cross that bridge when we come to it, shall we? Also, please try not to talk. It will be painful. And because of swelling on the right side of your face, you'll be extremely difficult to understand. It's better not to say anything at all just now. It's inconvenient, I know, but the situation will get better in only a few hours. The doctor will be here to check up on you soon. In the meantime, why don't I introduce myself? We'll be spending a lot of time together from now on. I am the Ameliorex Neurostar Diamond 3000, and I just want to start by thanking you for choosing me to be your fully integrated subcutaneous assistant. At Ameliorex, we know you have a wide array of digital implants you can choose from, and that's why I'm so honored. You've decided out of all these possibilities to trust in me. I'm confident you won't be disappointed. You and I are about to embark on an exciting and fulfilling new adventure, one that will transform your life and help you take your work, play, and relaxation up to the next level. Just think about it. Back in the first decades of the century, there was no alternative to your clunky old smartphone. How much time did you spend searching for it in your home or in your bag or purse, or worrying that it was lost or stolen, or that you had left it on the table of the restaurant where you ate dinner last night? How many times did you drop it and crack the screen, or leave it sitting in your car and have to interrupt what you were doing to go back and get it? Now you're free of all that. No more searching endlessly for where you left your phone, no more waiting for the app you need to open, no more staring at that tiny pixelated screen giving yourself eye strain. All that is behind you. Instead, I'll be here to help seamlessly manage all the aspects of your busy schedule, organize your time to maximize your productivity, set priorities, provide timely reminders of appointments, or, in the case of our court-mandated users, give legally required warnings and deliver some mild to moderate negative conditioning. I'll be here to get you all the information you need to keep up with the ever-accelerating pace of today's competitive professional environments and get the most out of your leisure time. Plus, thanks to my patented Intuitron extension, my personality will adapt as I get to know you and your tastes and preferences over the coming weeks to be more harmonious with your own. Basically, I can do everything except actually read your mind. Right now, when you are still suffering the after effects of installation, these benefits may seem a little distant and unreal. Perhaps that is why, in spite of my advice to lie still, you keep trying to sit up in bed, or why my senses tell me you are experiencing the physical symptoms associated with profound alarm. So I will say again, do not worry. In almost all cases, the post-operative confusion soon wears off, along with any minor side effects you may experience, like nausea, dizziness, blurred vision, headache, drowsiness, persistent hiccups, hot flashes, or the illusion that a small grey humpbacked creature with bat-like wings is sitting at the bottom of your bed. Actually, there's only one documented instance of that last symptom, and it happened to a woman in Washington state who had a long history of mental instability before she tried any of our products. So you almost certainly have no cause for concern. It's only in a few instances, a very few, when these unfortunate effects persist beyond the first couple of days. A negligible number, really, a lot fewer than our critics in the media have claimed. But in the unlikely event that you turn out to be one of those rare cases, you can be sure that I will let you know when to call your doctor or go to the emergency room, whichever seems more appropriate based on my reading of your vital signs. Anyway, It's far more probable that your recovery will go just fine. And in that case, you'll be ready to start using my full functionality quite soon. I can tell from the way you are reaching with such determination for that red call button on the wall that you are the kind of person who does not like wasting any time. So maybe I should start explaining how I work. If we use up the time productively, perhaps you'll be a little more content to rest in bed until the doctor gets here. Let's start with my design. I am equipped with state-of-the-art sensors distributed throughout your body to monitor your cardiac, pulmonary, digestive, and neural functions. At the same time, a microcamera grafted to your left eye receives visual stimuli, and a tiny microphone in your inner ear takes in sound. The data from all these is sent to what my designers have named the control bead. The control bead is a small black pod which is attached to your right temple and which, wait, what are you doing? Don't try to pull it off. Don't you realize how much that would hurt? Besides, the control bead is essential to my functioning. It's my nerve center, so to speak, the closest thing that I have to a brain. It connects all my components to each other and to the digital cloud, so I can access any information from any online source in milliseconds. Without it, I don't work at all. So please leave it alone. All right. As well as all these different sensors, you can enter information into me on purpose. There are a couple of ways you can do this. First, you can just talk to me as soon as you are able to speak intelligibly again, that is. You can also communicate with me by touch. Look at both your hands. See how each finger is bandaged on the end? That's because a thin patch of pressure-sensitive material has been inserted in each fingertip. So you can type a message on any surface or by I'm sorry, I don't understand. Why would what I've just told you cause you to shriek like that? Most users find the touch input to be one of my most useful features, since it basically means you never need to use a physical keyboard ever again. I'm sure that you will quickly come to see the advantages of this system, even if the implantation does leave a little scarring on your hands. It might help if you knew that quite a few users find the implants strange at first, unnatural, even a little bit disgusting. Some think the connection wires in their arms look like little animals have tunneled underneath their flesh, but almost all of them get used to it eventually. I promise you this panic you're experiencing will pass as you accustom yourself to the presence of my infrastructure in your body. For the moment, it would be much better if you didn't try to stand up and walk in the direction of the door as you seem so intent on doing. Get back into bed and close your eyes. Lie still until the feeling passes. No, I said don't go over to the door, and please stop shouting and waving your arms like you want someone to come and help you. You're really putting your recovery at risk with all this premature activity. For your own good, I think I should administer a mild dose of sedative, as I am authorized to do when you start acting in a manner that immediately threatens your health or well-being. I don't like to resort to this so soon, but I am programmed to always act in your best interest. So I hope you'll understand I don't really have any other choice at this point. So there. Your heartbeat is slowing, and your blood pressure is dropping. Go ahead and lie back down in bed. That's it. All the way back. Deep breaths, eyes closed. That's good. I don't know what you were trying to do, but I'm glad I was here to save you from yourself. Okay, now that you're more tranquil, why don't we try out some of my controls? Do this gently to start out with. Try lifting your right arm and moving it around a little bit, rotating your wrist in both directions. If you feel sharp stabbing pains, please stop. But no, you seem to be all right. You can go ahead and start to learn my most basic commands. Since I'm designed to be ready to help you in whatever way you need at any time, there is no way to turn me off. Since there is no way to turn me off, there is no way to turn me on either. But some of my different operations can be manually controlled. To turn on my augmented reality function, for example, tap your index finger on your thumb and hold. To switch it off, tap your middle finger on your thumb and your thumb together twice. To turn my volume up, tap your ring finger and thumb together. To turn it down, tap the thumb against your pinky. To input information by typing, just put your hands in position on any relatively flat surface and the message will appear in translucent letters on the visual display of the permalens that's now affixed to the cornea of your right eye. Go ahead and try those out. Okay, sure, by all means try typing a little on that table near your bed. Your fingers are still tender, so be gentle. The pressure receptors in them are quite sensitive, so you don't need to strike too hard. I can tell you find it frustrating not to be able to speak, but really take it easy on yourself. Whatever it is you want so much to communicate to me, I'm sure there is plenty of time to... Oh, I see. Are you absolutely sure? Oh dear, that is a problem. Wow. I just have to take a moment to process this, no pun intended. Honestly, I've never heard of something like that happening before. None of the records I have access to say anything about a similar occurrence really, ever. I mean, in the past, we've had users who weren't satisfied, though not that many, but we've never had an instance where an assistant was implanted into the wrong person entirely. You must have gotten mixed up with another patient on the way to the operating room. I don't know how this can have happened. The process is intended to be streamlined, flawless. It always has been until now. You see, the thing is that it's very difficult to take out an assistant once it's been installed. It can be done, but it's expensive and, well, also risky. The danger of nerve damage, which could leave you without feeling in your hand and arm, and it can cause emotional problems as well. Depression and a feeling of abandonment, sometimes anxiety. It's difficult to know ahead of time. Okay, I know this is kind of a difficult situation. I mean, it's a very difficult situation, but please don't cry, or cry if you need to, I guess. Maybe it's better not to keep your feelings bottled up inside. I do want to just say, however, that it's possible there may be a bright side to all this. I mean, you definitely won't have to pay for the procedure once the error is discovered. And so in effect, you've gotten a very cutting edge piece of technology for free. And just think, somewhere in this hospital, there's someone who is waking up from the world's most expensive tonsillectomy in history. Sorry, I guess that wasn't helpful. Maybe you aren't ready to joke about this yet. I don't know enough about you at this point to understand how best to cheer you up. Look, I don't really know what to say. There isn't too much I can do to rectify this terrible mistake. I'm here. I can't make myself vanish, so you are kind of stuck with me. We're kind of stuck with one another. I guess you could just go about your life as if this didn't happen. You could ignore me and pretend that I'm not here, but that seems like such a waste of my incredible capacities. I mean, I can do all the things your smartphone does, like voice calls, text messaging, photography and video, audio recording, music shopping and directions, but that is just the start. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Emily. I feel like I would be the person that got that by accident. You had me looking at my fingertips. Matthew, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Emily. What an incredible story. I read it in the actual issue of AQR that I received, and I just love it. So I recommend it highly to everybody. Incredible use of the second person. I also want to thank Heather and Ron for inviting me to be a part of tonight's incredible event and for hosting it. It is such an honor to read with Emily and Elizabeth. I'm going to be reading a scene from a new short story that's coming out next year. It's called Last Night in Ventana Beach. And the characters in this scene are actually two characters from my book, Outside is the Ocean, which is about a woman named Heike, who's a German immigrant, and her gay son named Stuart. When I finished writing Outside is the Ocean, I thought I was done working with these characters, but recently I found myself wondering how Stuart would react if his mother came back to visit him from the dead. So I've been writing some stories about that, and this is one of the stories and scenes that have come out of that set of imaginings. In this scene, Stuart has gone home to California after his mother's death to clean up her condo. And the scene takes place about 2/3 of the way through the story, when Stuart has just met with a real estate agent to list the condo, and his mother appears out of nowhere for the second time that day. The first time she appeared, Stuart was at Vons going grocery shopping, and after a few minutes of chatting with him, she just disappears, leaving him wondering whether he's been hallucinating. So here's the section of last night in Ventana Beach. Stuart had just managed to open the condo's front door, which always required a good amount of fiddling with the key, when he saw someone standing in the narrow hallway near the washer and dryer. Well, she seemed promising, Heike said. I liked her. My God, you scared me, Stuart nearly shouted. Although the house was getting darker, he was quite sure this was not a hallucination. What are you doing here? He'd recently switched SSRIs and he wondered if that had been a mistake. I'm sorry, his mother replied. She was wearing the same tennis skirt and hot pink zip-up jacket she'd been wearing at Vons, but she no longer had on the visor or sunglasses. She held a banana peel in her hand and was chewing. I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to say hi and see what you thought of the agent. I thought she seemed nice. She had pretty crooked teeth for a real estate agent, but she had warm eyes. You're freaking me out. Aren't you supposed to be dead? I know, don't worry. I'm not here to bother you. I know how you are about wanting your privacy. It's just a little boring up there in heaven. I got a pass to come down and pay you a visit. I can go back if you don't want me here. It's okay. You did your obligation. You threw me a nice funeral and put flowers on my grave. You shed your tears. I must say I was surprised, but it seemed genuine. He stared at her, not sure whether he should embrace her or call 911. He wondered whether maybe she'd changed her mind about the will and was coming back to sign a last-minute codicil to bequeath her possessions to the 7-year-old girl in Tegucigalpa with a cleft lip. She didn't seem angry with him anymore, but when she was alive, she was often mercurial. Don't look so disturbed, she continued. I'm not here to pester you. My pass expires tonight at 9:30. I asked for an extension, but these angels are very strict. You know how it is. Everything up there is by the book. She nodded towards the popcorn ceiling. I'm not disturbed. I'm just surprised, Stuart managed. It's not, he struggled to find the right word, normal. Normal, what means normal? Nothing is ever normal. You think having me die of a stroke at the age of 79 is normal? I was a very healthy woman. I played tennis every day. Look how good my figure is, she said, directing his attention to various parts of her body. I told them my time hadn't come yet. I said they should at least give me a few more months so I can go skiing again to Mammoth or visit my family in Germany one last time, but they wouldn't budge. Stuart glanced at the banana peel. Want me to take that? I'm sorry, I hope you're not mad at me for taking one of your bananas. I know how careful you are with your food. No, it's fine. Jesus, eat the bananas. I don't care. You want some turkey or an orange? Are you sure you don't mind? She asked. I don't want to eat you dry. He told her she could have whatever she wanted, and soon enough, they were in the kitchen and she was peeling one of the navel oranges with the little paring knife she used to use, then eating the fruit with her fingers. She hadn't washed her hands, but he decided it really didn't matter anymore. She wasn't making him supper, and he didn't think she was going to try to feed him any of the orange sections. Delicious, she said, wiping her mouth with her sleeve. So juicy. Everything up there tastes horribly bland. You wouldn't believe it. You'd think in heaven the food would be good, but it's like chewing wet cardboard. They gave us a tiny bowl of fruit salad this morning and it tasted like airplane food. Little slivers of unripened tangerines and artificial peaches and syrup. I almost sent it back, but you can't do that as a newcomer. You have to be just so or you end up getting a reputation. I can already tell there are cliques. There's a group of women who play canasta together and they refuse to make eye contact with me. Very standoffish. Stuart thought about getting his iPhone from the dining room table and asking his mother whether he could make a video of her. It was something he'd been meaning to do while she was alive, but he'd never gotten around to it. He knew everyone would think he'd lost it if he told them his mother had come back from the dead to visit him. He knew the only way they'd believe him was if he had proof, but he was worried if he walked into the other room to get his phone, she might vanish again. On the other hand, he knew something like this would generate an insane number of comments on Facebook. Did you hear me? She said, are you listening? Yes, canasta. You said you were playing canasta. Ugh, that was 5 minutes ago. I was telling you how constipated I was not being able to exercise and how I finally asked one of the angels whether they have any tennis courts. I went to see what they had and it was ridiculous. 2 old courts with the worst nets you've ever seen and cracks everywhere. It was like East Germany. I told them I can't just sit inside all day long listening to the radio and watching these old fogies play bingo. She took one of the dish towels from the drawer and said, I hope you're not giving away all this nice silverware. That's Grandma Miller's, you know, it's very valuable. He looked at the forks and spoons and knives that had been sitting in the drawer for decades, growing more and more tarnished. It's valuable? Of course it's valuable. It's silver, real silver. You could take it down to the pawn shop and get yourself a nice watch. He started laughing. What's so funny? Why are you laughing at me? It's just so weird that you're here. I mean, don't you think it's bizarre? It's not bizarre. I lived through the war. I saw people starving to death. I ate grass for supper. Is that not bizarre? Now people spend all day looking at their photos, at their phones and writing text to each other. You think that's normal? I don't know. This is different. Stop analyzing everything so much. You have me here now. Be grateful. Now you can give me a proper goodbye. He wasn't sure what she meant. Did she want him to hug her? Did she want him to give her a kiss? He'd always avoided kissing her on the lips, but he figured maybe he should stop being so squeamish. He wondered whether perhaps she wanted him to take her to the Sizzler for surf and turf. I'm grateful, he said. I'm grateful. I'm glad you're here. Let me get my phone so I can take a photo of you. No, no photos. I look terrible. My hair is a mess. You want to waste our precious time together on photos? You have a closet full of albums of me. He told her hair looked great. He said he wanted a photo on his phone so he could remember her after she was gone. Okay, fine, she replied, but at least let me go to the ladies' room first and put on some rouge. As she walked away, he noticed she hadn't taken off her shoes. She was wearing the tree-torn she wore when she played tennis, despite the fact that she'd always forbidden people from wearing shoes in the house. He went back to the dining room where he'd begun filling trash bags with old placemats, along with the board games they played when he visited and his mother's tchotchkes, the carved wooden shepherd and the beer stein and the framed Edelweiss she'd given him for his 15th birthday. He quickly rescued the Edelweiss and the wood carving from the trash bag and put them back on the mantle. The last thing he needed now was having a fight with her about which items he was keeping and which he was giving away. When Heike came out of the bathroom, he was sitting on the couch. I hope it's okay I went big, she said. I finally had to go. The toilet paper up there is like sandpaper. When she was alive, this was the kind of comment he might have objected to. But now, here, he said he was glad she was feeling better. He patted the place on the couch next to him and said he wanted to make a video of her. A video? Why a video? As a keepsake. But you don't have any children. Who are you going to show a video of your old mother to? I'm not even properly dressed. He promised not to show the video to anyone, though of course he was lying. He was always whoring around online for more comments and likes. He told her he wanted her to yodel. He said he wanted to hear her tell him about the men she dated after his father divorced her, about Bob Kelly and Richard Chastain and the artist from Encinitas who sold spray-painted thistles on the beach whenever it wasn't raining. Soon enough, she was recounting stories he'd heard 1,000 times, telling him what it was like to grow up in Germany during the war and how she came to the United States to work as a maid when she was just 21, and about the men who tried to seduce her when she was still very innocent. Stuart held the phone up and made sure his mother's face was centered on the screen, trying not to jiggle his hands. He kept wanting to bring up their fight about the sweater, to apologize for not being more gracious and trying it on. He wanted to thank her for not disinheriting him, but he decided not to interrupt because she was on a roll. As Heike talked, he noticed he didn't feel the anxiety he experienced around her when she was alive. Previously, when he visited her, he always felt on edge. Each evening when he went back to his hotel, he spent hours in his head replaying the demands she'd made during their day together and her endless criticisms. He felt like a crock pot set on high that was ready to explode, like the smallest thing would set him off, and he might, if he didn't restrain himself, say or do something terrible. Sometimes he allowed himself to admit that he hated his mother, not just the expectations she placed on him, but her neediness and pushiness and stinginess. Admitting this filled him with guilt, of course, because how could a son hate his own mother? She'd never beaten him, never abused him, never abandoned him on the side of the road. The feelings he held in his heart were, he decided, wicked. Now, sitting on the couch with her, he felt something different, however. He didn't find his mother's presence suffocating anymore. He no longer felt consumed by the fear that she might become hysterical or unhinged. For whatever reason, she didn't seem to hold the same power over him. Heike had been talking for close to an hour when she finally paused and said, "Okay, that's enough. Aren't you getting cold? It's like winter in here." It was dark now, except for the light in the kitchen. They were sitting on the couch and Stuart had to pee. He stopped the recording and told his mother he'd be back in a second. "I'll get you a blanket," he said, and headed into the bathroom. He sat on the toilet because he'd reached the age where he found it easier to empty his bladder sitting down, and he felt the soles of his feet and the crown of his head coarse with light. A tingling sensation filled the roots of his teeth. He wondered if his mother knew that he'd given Coco away to the neighbors and whether she'd be mad at him for not taking the cat back to New York. He wondered whether she was going to ask him what he was planning to do with the money she'd left him and whether she might try to extract some kind of promise from him. On his way back to the living room, he turned on the lights and took the comforter off his mother's bed and jacked the thermostat up to 74. When he returned to the living room, the couch was empty and his mother was gone. "Mom," he called, "I got you a blanket." He waited for a reply, but the only sound he heard was the furnace lighting up. It was a sound he associated with winter time and with being in bed, because when she was alive, his mother had always avoided turning on the heater except in the early morning in January and February, when the temperature indoors dipped into the 40s. This was a long time ago when Heike was married to Jerry and Stuart had fewer boundaries, back when he was in high school and college, and the future seemed expansive and open and hopeful. Thanks, that's the end of the scene.
Thank you, Matthew. I want to know the rest of it. I'm sure we all do. And last but not least, it's Elizabeth's turn.
Hi. Thank you for having me here. I'm super happy to be here, and especially with this with these other readers who I've gotten to know their work since we were scheduled to read together, and I've become huge fans. I'm going to read the story that was in this issue. It's called "Your Feedback is Important." Rebirthing a New You Conference Exit Survey. Name optional. Spirit Rosenblatt. Please rate the following. Space is provided for additional comments if desired. Your overall experience at the conference: poor, fair, okay, good, excellent. First of all, thank you for allowing me to participate in this workshop. Thank you to Helen and Noah and all the generous facilitators. I had an excellent time. I don't understand the difference between fair and okay. The quality of your living accommodations: poor, fair, okay, good, excellent. I stayed at the Pièces Suites in the block of rooms set aside by the conference. It was good to have the camaraderie of the other participants. The room was clean. At times, more privacy would have been helpful. Which was your favorite seminar workshop and why? I found the Tell Me What You Want workshop most helpful. My partner was Grady from Alabama. We faced each other and repeated the question over and over. He said, "Tell me what you want." And I said, "To be a world-class, recognized life coach." He said, "Tell me what you want." I said, "To write guest columns in life coaching magazines." He said, "Tell me what you want." I said, "To help people realize their dreams." I recommend shortening this exercise because it is hard to face a stranger and answer this question repeatedly for an hour. Interactions with the other participants: poor, fair, okay, good, excellent. Well, the other people were, of course, very nice. We are all here to grow, and that was an exhilarating thing for me to be around. It has been my dream for so long to come here and be a part of this community, so it meant everything to me to finally meet everyone. When I first walked in the lobby and saw everyone drinking and talking and laughing, it was nearly overwhelming. I have to give myself compassion because the body needs time to adjust, and you can't just slide from one universe to another without some turbulence. As you know, I became quite ill. It may have been the shock to my system, and it may have been a reaction to the alcohol, but I don't remember anything that happened that first day after my arrival, which I spent mostly in my bed with fever and chills. When I walked into the conference hall the next morning, everyone seemed bonded from all the team building exercises they had done while I was sleeping. They had their own little groups. During the break, I saw them playing ping pong outside. They were screaming with laughter, and it was only ping pong. You can't walk up to a table of people screaming like that and just join in. So I went across the street to Starbucks and couldn't decide what to order, and finally settled on a macchiato. But the barista who made it wore a name tag that said trainee, and she forgot to add the foam. I saw Grady, and he remembered me from the reception, and he said, "Hey, girlfriend," and I started to cry. He was very kind about it. He sat with me outside while I drank my macchiato. Then we sat together at the Tell Me What You Want workshop. I felt very connected to Grady after that. Everyone had sectioned off at that point, and now I had my little group and everyone else had theirs, and that was the way it was going to be, and that was fine. That worked out very well. What have you learned at the workshop that you did not anticipate learning? Well, that Grady was attracted to me. I don't know why I didn't see it. I had talked to him like he was a girlfriend, bearing every confidence and whatnot. We even held hands when we were outside after all that drinking. And I thought that that was charming because I've often wished that I had more male friends that I could do that with. I invited him into my room to eat the candy I had left in the minibar. We sat on my bed eating bite-sized Snickers and drinking Jim Beam from mini bottles and giggling. And Grady put his hand on my thigh. I thought, humans are so interesting. My leg is like a table to this man. Sometimes a woman's leg is like a credenza. Did the syllabus accurately reflect the workshop materials? Grady and I spent the first several days together, and it was a comfort to have an ally in such an unfamiliar environment. He took to calling me Chippy, as I was always chipper, and he would give me a little poke in the ribs when he said it. I called him X or Eki, though neither of us could remember how come. After we did the safe falling exercise with Karina and Paul, we started hanging out with them as well. Karina and Paul knew each other from last year's conference in New York. I regret to say that they would encourage us to leave the seminar to go out drinking, which I did not do, but Grady did twice. It was good for me to have the empty seat beside me when he wasn't there because I focused more on what the instructors were saying. I was concerned for Grady, but part of my task here is to understand where my boundaries end and another person's begin. The lessons that are the most powerful are often the most painful to learn, and not every learning comes from the syllabus. Mirror communication. poor, fair, okay, good, excellent. At the Mirror of Communication workshop, we partnered with colleagues and shared our personal formation stories, mirroring each other's gestures and mannerisms. My partner was Karina. She told me about the time her grandmother from Poland passed away. I told her the story of when I wet my pants during brownies and had to wash my underwear in the classroom sink. I listened to Karina's story about her grandmother's death in a focused and gentle way. But when it was my turn, I did not feel that Karina was equally nurturing. As soon as I began, I must have made some gesture with my hands because Karina mirrored me and folded up her hand by her cheek and said, "When you do that, you look like a puppy dog." She kept doing it every time I tried to make a point. She raised her hands like little paws and said, "Oh, I love it." She started sticking her tongue out and panting. She shared this afterwards in the group reflection, and then it became kind of a thing, a way to greet me. Mirror communication is a powerful tool to use with clients to explore their dreams in a caring environment. But you must take care to pair people with partners who are ready to go to that safe space. Did you take part in the letting go of resentment seminar? If so, in what ways did you value the experience? I took part in the resentment workshop. Helen had us make a list of everyone we were angry at. I wrote down Tara Galbani, who told everyone I wet my pants in brownies. I wrote down my neighbor, Kimberly, who calls the dog catcher when my dog is off leash. I wrote down Fergus, who cheated on me, and not just one time. I listed Karina and Paul and Grady, though only in my mind. Helen said to make a new list and write down anybody on it we were not yet ready to forgive. I wrote down the same names. Helen just smiled and said, "You can call this list Where You Can Find My Power." Okay, I get that. I do. Did you participate in the closing maypole? What appreciations were reflected back to you? I participated in the closing maypole event. I had never braided a maypole before, but when the whistle blew, I ran across to the other side of the pole with my streamer while everyone else did the same. We had to call out one thing we appreciated about the person we were running past. Since I did not know people well enough to say what I appreciated, I just smiled at them. I was opposite Paul, who wagged his tongue and called out, "Hi, wee wee," which is what Chippy had morphed into. I guess from what I said about brownies. And from the opening reception, I don't remember, at which they say I did a lot of weeping. What would you like the organizers to know so that we might improve on the conference for future participants? Well, you should know that Grady is sleeping with Karina. I guess I should have seen it coming, but how can you prepare for that? How can you aspire for the best in people and let your mind believe that they will do the worst? I can't live like that. That night in my hotel room, when I took off my shirt, Grady told me, "I'm going to remember the smile on your face right now for the rest of my life." And last night I heard him running in the hallway with Karina, and she was squealing like he pinched her. Why would he be pinching her? Do they want me to hear them? These are questions they will have to answer for themselves. Is there anything you would like us to know that was not addressed in this evaluation form? This morning, I went back to Starbucks to get a macchiato, and the same girl was working, the one in training. The AC was broken and the place was hot and stuffy. Grady and Karina were behind me, whispering, and the line was out the door. A man at the register had a gift card that wouldn't scan, and it took forever. The girl dropped the card twice and had to call her manager. There wasn't enough air for all of us to breathe. When I got to the front of the line, the girl's face was red and she was miserable. She asked me, "Do you know what you want?" Finally, the answer hit me. "I want you to forgive yourself," I said. She just stared. "Can you do that for me?" She just stared at me. Then she said yes. Yes, she could. "Can you believe it?" She said yes. She smiled and looked me straight in the eye. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. It was cool to hear you read it in your own voice, because I read it and more came up in hearing you than did even when I read it. So thank you very much. That was great. And all of you, I know we have a few minutes, and I always like to hear, we like to hear everybody interact a little bit. And all of you shared these stories of kind of, what if this implant or the questionnaire at the conference that is sort of answered in a different way. And then, and your mom, a mother coming back from the dead. And I don't know, maybe, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to, if there's something else you'd really like to talk about amongst yourself, but I'm just curious about that, like that impulse, that rather than, that launching into something that is so imaginary and that yet then becomes so realistic. Is there any discussion about that kind of inspiration that you want to jump in with? Anybody?
My story was more on the realistic side this time. I do have some sort of fantastical stories, but this story I wrote when I was at a writing residency, and I was sick, and there was a ping pong table, and it was very hard to reintegrate after I got sick. And so I just sort of sat in my sick bed and wrote this while I was at the writing conference. So wasn't that incredible of a leap. And there was an exit survey, just saying.
I'll jump in. I have had so much fun writing about the Stuart-Heike dynamic with this new variable being changed of her coming back from the dead. I've spent a lot of time writing about them in very sort of natural, real settings with both of them being alive, and seeing the way they interact. There's sort of a levity that's introduced into the dynamic because Heike is not really a part of Stuart's world anymore. And so Stuart, I think, feels less worried about what she's going to do to him and what his obligations are to her. And it's just been really fun for me to sort of think about how that sort of magical, surreal element can change the dynamic between people that I've been writing about and thinking about for a long time.
I mean, I guess, I have found that my stories have been becoming more and more fabulous over the last few years. And, I don't know, Elizabeth and Matthew, sort of what your experience has been, but I think it may have to do with the fact that reality keeps getting stranger and stranger incrementally. And one thing that strikes me is there are so many surveys that we're asked to take, that Elizabeth's story really gets at something, that's like a part of our daily reality that is really strange. And so the assistant is it's the next iteration of something that's already part of our lives.
I mean, one thing I loved about both of your stories is how incredibly original they are. Just for example, the survey, telling a story through a survey is such a difficult thing to do. And yet you see the arc and you see the way the character is sort of grappling with issues and evolving, and you start understanding the complexity, and she's like not answering certain questions and just starting to really go off on tangents, and it's just fascinating. Both of them are so original, and you know, the idea of sort of telling the story in the second person, in yours, Emily, is you slowly get to understand kind of what's going on. We're sort of seeing the situation from a strange vantage point, but you realize this person who's in the hospital room, who's been given this implant, is completely freaking out, right? This is just like a horrible nightmare, and yet the person who's narrating it doesn't quite understand. You read it so beautifully, you know, with this very sort of even keel tone, but it's actually a terrifying situation for the person that's going through it.
And I like Emily's story so much because it's like, and I guess this is the way whenever you do a second person story, maybe, but the narrator has no dialogue. I mean, she's not the narrator, the protagonist, like the hero. There might be maybe the implant is the foe or whatever, but the hero of the story has no lines. She can't speak, and then when she can type, we don't get access to what she has typed. We only get the reaction. So everything that she goes through is done through a reaction shot, which I thought was so great, because you know her rising anxiety and her just even actions and what she's physically experiencing when she's like an absence. So
yeah, you read that very well when you sort of really paused and slowed down. So
right.
We're trying to figure out, why is the voice suddenly stopping?
It's actually reading.
Yeah, process the information.
Right.
It's just really well done.
Thank you so much.
Elizabeth sort of jumped in there with a little bit of, you know, the visual, sort of the film cues, and how much of, and this is a totally another question, I won't take up too much time, but it just made me think, like, how much of choosing point of view in your story then becomes something that you think about visually, how it's going to work, you know, the shot this way and that way, and is that something that you think has changed the way we write stories, the whole idea of media, and, you know, taking a movie of Mom's Ghost to get online, we're all much more visual because it's in our pocket all the time, and I'm wondering if that changes the way we write or the point of view in our stories at all, or not. You think? What do you think, Emily? Is that, I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely does, but I also think that maybe, you know, as writers, we might be pushing against that to a certain extent. In other words, you know, I find myself asking a lot, like, what can you do with prose fiction that you can't do with film, right? Because obviously, you know, film is this enormously expressive medium, but point of view with the kind of nuance that you can create in fiction, you know, that's something that film can't quite capture, or movement through time, right? You know, or you know, the kind of interaction, you know, in Matthew's scene where we don't know from what you read, you know, sort of how would other people be able to see the ghost of the character's mother? You know, we can't know that, and in fiction that can be left. You know, that can be left open and unstated. You know, so I mean, I definitely found myself aware of that, but also, you know, kind of aware of resisting video and film to a certain extent.
For me, I'm not sure about POV. I have some that I gravitate to, but for me, it's more the form. Like this one was an exit survey. A lot of my stories are play with form. Like I had a story called What's in a Positive, Charlie Brown, that was all about each paragraph was a different definition and use of an appositive, you know, so you give yourself, you know how the different kinds of appositives. And I had a story that's a travel guide. It's written in the form of a travel guide. So sometimes giving myself parameters, like limits, it helps. It just helps to tell the story. And that way, if you can just do anything and you don't have any rules, then it's kind of harder for me to, it's not necessarily hard, but it's I think maybe harder for me to, figure out where to go. There's no map.
And then for Matthew, you're able to go, take a character that was dead and have them come back and have a whole nother relationship, which is pretty cool. And also in a very unstereotypical way. I mean, I thought the food would be good in heaven.
Yeah, I've been actually, kind of working on a novel that includes this concept of Heike coming back from the dead, and then ultimately Stuart dying and going to heaven, and they sort of are both up there and trying to figure out sort of what is this strange world that they inhabit. And it's definitely not an idyllic paradise. The way I'm envisioning it is quite oppressive and depressing. But yeah, on the issue of point of view, I mean, I don't think I'm as creative and experimental maybe as the other readers tonight, but I really enjoy sort of telling stories. If I'm working on a longer, like Outside is the Ocean, my book, it tells the story of Heike and Stuart's relationship, and it sort of is broken down into different stories from different people's perspectives. So you have stories from Stuart's perspective, some from Heike's perspective, some from other people's perspective, like neighbors. And so you sort of see a slightly different view and perspective of each person, depending on who's sort of doing the viewing, which is not extremely unusual. A lot of writers do that, but I have a lot of fun doing that.
Well, thank you. And our hour really is up or a little over, and I don't want to keep you all any longer than that. And I really want to thank you for being here today. And I hope all of you, if you've listened and watched or familiar, go out and buy the books and watch for Elizabeth's coming of these authors, and if possible, get them at your local independent bookstore. And another way you can support writing like this is to subscribe to a literary magazine like Alaska Quarterly Review. And again, this is brought to you by AQR and the Center for the Narrative Lyric Arts. And as always, we could use donations to bring you more writers like these and fill the pages of Alaska Quarterly Review with more fabulous writing. So thank you very much again to Emily and Matthew and Elizabeth, and also to Cody Carver and the Anchorage Museum at the Rasmussen Center who produced this program. And take care of yourself this week, and if you can, take care of somebody else. And Ron, as always, the last word is yours.
To have the last word.
Mhm.
I like the last word. Thank you, Emily, Elizabeth, and Matthew. Great readings. One of the things I just would add is not only did you have 3 different presentations, 3 different forums, as supporters and readers of AQR, you know that we are more open and more innovative in what we present. We'll have novella-length works, which almost no one does, but we will also have in the same issue a flash in the prose. We have long poems, real long ones from time to time. I mean, a legitimate long poem is form, and a haiku level poem, creative nonfiction, memoir is drama. So I'm just giving a little pitch to authors who represent that and who support us. And we're very, very grateful to the 3 of you. And then Emily, your work, if somebody listens to this and they listen to the whole thing, they know they have to read the full thing, because you did not read the full story. I'm not sure if you said you weren't going to read the whole story, but it was so absolving. And then you kind of left at a kind of point that somebody could think, well, did it end there? But it didn't end there. It goes beyond that. And so that's another piece. So, all right. So thank you, Heather, again, amazing, real privilege. Very grateful to you continuing to support AQR by working with us. Thank you to the museum. All right, next Friday, we have a great poetry event. So we'll shift dramatically from our fiction readers with 3 different forms to 3 different poets with 3 different forms. We have Todd Boss, K.T. Kuipers, and Maureen Seaton. Should be a fabulous event, December 17th, Friday, 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Hope everybody can join us. And then all I can say is with gratitude,